When you talk to salespeople and you ask them, hey, what's one topic you'd like to dive into and get some information on? Typically, overwhelmingly, people say, I want to know how to handle objections. Well, we've discussed this back in the discovery module, where if you ask even better questions, if you're listening, you're asking follow-up questions, often during that portion of the sales cycle, you should be able to eliminate some of the biggest concerns or objections in the sales process. And likely when you get into this section, they're already taken care of. At the end of the day, however, we realize people do have some concerns when it comes to making the final commitment. When they've got to give you their credit card, they've got to write a check where there's truly a commitment. And so during that phase, we have to make sure we have the right skills and we're able to handle that concern with the client in a way that continues to help the sale move forward. Remember, we are not crafty, wily salespeople trying to trick people into doing something they don't want to do, or even more so, doing something that's not right for them and for you, because this is a win-win. Here at ZO, it's not about selling product into an account. It's about selling product out the front door. And that's the only types of accounts you're going to partner with anyway. So when we handle objections or concerns, then we want to make sure we've truly partnered with the right type of clients that have the ability and the staffing to help them move it out the front door. So what are we going to cover in this module? We're going to talk about some of the most common concerns you have that you get on a regular basis. These are the ones that just come up frequently, and we need to really be on our A game, because if we handle these, the majority of them are going to go out of the way. The next is we're going to talk about a process you can use. So regardless of the concern you get, you use this process. It really is a great framework to have a conversation and put yourself and the client on the same side. Talk about clarifying the objection, restating and cushioning the objection, why this is so powerful, how we draw out hidden concerns that they may have, ones that they may not feel 100% confident sharing with you, or maybe they just think it's not a big deal, but it's that one that they're hiding that is really keeping them from moving forward. Then we'll talk about isolating the primary one. So that way we invest time in our conversations around the one that's truly the sticking point. And then lastly, we'll talk about responding to objections or concerns. Notice I say objections there. Well, that's what a lot of salespeople, and myself included, I get an objection. It just sounds so harsh. And I think a better description is really a concern. You wouldn't have engaged with a client this deep into the process if there weren't some type of collaboration or we felt there was a good fit. So I think a better description is, again, concerns, and that's why we do it. Now, in the sales process, you notice we put it down here after we provide the solution. And the reason we do that is not that you're not going to address concerns in other parts of the conversation. This is where it typically happens, because after you've presented a solution and you've discussed some options, that's where that true commitment takes place. But it can happen anywhere during the cycle. You just have to be knowledgeable and kind of use your sales acumen to know when to address them and how to address them at the right time. All right, what do you say? Let's jump in. Let's start out by defining what a concern is. And this is not a trick question. It is made to get you to think about it a bit. So I'm going to ask you to pause the video at this time and answer the questions on this page. Number one, what is the definition of a concern, or what is an objection? What causes clients or prospects to give concerns? When do they occur, and when should you address them? So again, just pause the video right now, take about 2.5 to 3 minutes and think about these and jot down your thoughts. And I'll see you in about 3 minutes. So what did you come up with? It's probably similar. It's not a trick question again. What's the definition of a concern? I guess in the terms of sales, it's anything the client does or says that keeps them from moving forward in the process. So if they're putting the brakes on there's a concern. There's a reason why they're putting the brakes on. And that could be just to schedule the next appointment. That could be something very simple. At the same time, that's a concern, and that's holding us up from moving forward. And sometimes these concerns are merely speed bumps. We might hit them, but we've got enough energy and momentum to move forward. And again, this isn't about being pushy. It's about staying focused. What causes them to give concern? Well, maybe it's a past experience where they've been sold some product or been promised something. It's human nature, right? When you talk about selling or salespeople, and immediately it's just human reaction to put up a resistance wall, slow down, and people tend to just feel more comfortable with status quo, even if status quo is putting them in a strong amount of pain. And so they could have had a bad experience. They maybe are unsure about your solution. They may not trust you. They may not trust your product's going to do what you said it's going to do. There's a lot of reasons. Now, when do they occur? If your answer was all the time, sure. They can happen before you even walk in the door. They can happen when you pick up the phone and call them and ask them for an appointment. It could be, during the discovery process. It can happen anytime. But even more importantly is when they come up, when should you address them? Now, initial reaction is, well, I'm going to address them right away. Well, that may be the case. If you really want to operate at a high level, we want to make sure we take each one as it comes and think about it. It doesn't mean we need to stop and address that concern. We potentially might be providing information further into the sales cycle that will overcome that or answer that concern or question. And so we want to be careful we don't get into this kind of tennis match back and forth, which creates kind of an unhealthy volley, almost a me versus them type of thing. So be thoughtful about addressing concerns. You're not trying to avoid them. You're just trying to handle the conversation in a way that makes the most sense for you and, more importantly, your client. And oftentimes, sometimes these might go away the more you get into the conversation with the client. So be careful not to just jump in and always try to address the concern immediately. This will make more sense if we get deeper into this module. And then finally, addressing concerns, you want to at least acknowledge them. So if you acknowledge it, you say, hey, I understand why that's a question. I've heard that, from other clients in the past. There's a few things I'm going to cover as we go through here that will answer that. Is it okay if we continue on? So something like that. So with that said, now that we know what a concern is and when they occur and when we may or may not want to address them, let's jump into the process itself. So here's the addressing concerns process. And this is more like a lot of micro steps, like little steps that you take. So look at 12 o'clock here. 12 o'clock would be where the client or prospect gives you an objection. And at that point, when they give you that concern, like, well, we're not quite prepared to invest $4,000 yet, but, let's kind of see where we're at. And why don't you check back with me next quarter? It could sound something like that. Or, you know what, we're really busy right now. We're really locked in with Skin Medica and their brilliant distinctions program. I appreciate you calling, but, at this point in time, it really makes no sense for us to talk. Boom. That's an objection. That's a concern. At that point, what we want to do is clarify and listen. Immediate reaction for us is we want to jump to where? The respond step, right? They give us an objection, we want to respond. This is where this process is a little bit different. Instead of becoming adversarial, you want to create a collaboration with your client. So you clarify and listen. Listening is a huge rapport building, trust building skill that you can use. And just by asking good questions follow-up questions, questions that demonstrate you're truly interested in them, will actually build trust versus you trying to answer their question. So you've probably been in that situation before. Someone has a question, you respond. It sounds like good human nature, but in the addressing concerns process, this is where we almost want to just slow things down a little bit. And it doesn't mean this has to take 30 minutes, but it could take 60, 90 seconds. It could be 3 or 4 minutes, depending on the situation. Once we've clarified and listened, we want to restate and cushion the objection. So we'll go over restating and some of the tweaks and things that we can do to make this effective, and using cushions to, again, create a collaborative conversation. Once we've done that, this is where you operate at the A+ level, that 9.9 level. You draw out hidden objections. And these objections or concerns are the ones that they're kind of keeping from you because, they're nice people and they don't want to hurt your feelings and so forth. So they give you the objection that sounds good, and then they have the real one. But, this one sounds good, right? And most salespeople take it and they move on, right? Oh, well, I get it. Yeah, I'll call you back in another 3 months, okay? Well, there's probably a hidden concern, and it's not that they're just trying to be crafty and wily. In most cases, they're just trying to be nice. So we have to create a conversation where they feel comfortable and have enough trust in you that they can share it. Once we've got all the concerns on the table, then we isolate and find out what the key one is. What's the one where if we were able to satisfy or help them overcome this concern, they would truly move forward, and the others would probably dissipate and kind of go off like, well, those aren't that big a deal. So we get all the objections out, especially draw out the hidden, find out which one, because they could have 2 or 3 of them, is the key one. And then we have earned the right at that point to respond. And along the way, we're going to get a lot of clues from them on what our response might look like. And so after we've responded, we move to the trial close. So we're going to jump into each one of these steps and talk about some techniques you can use. And some of it is going to be very familiar, but we're going to try to make this as a conscious, deliberate step when you're trying to address a concern. So question here, and I'll let you just ponder this, but how does this process compare from what you typically do when you try to address concerns? I know the trap I fall into is I get the objection up here, right? And I jump over here because it often sounds like, oh, they got a quick question. I can answer that. I jump here. Well, pretty soon you notice you're in this tennis match, back from an objection to a response, and you haven't gone through this. And this is where the magic happens, where you slow down, you help people think it through, you ask good questions, and oftentimes it's not your response, it's just the timing of it. It's once they've really assessed the situation and slowed down and thought about it, and then you do respond, and you'll find in some cases you don't even have to because they've actually answered their objection. So think about that. What do you say? Let's jump in to clarify and listen and talk about some techniques you can use there. Before we jump into clarify and listen, let's first get as many objections or concerns out on this page. So think about the sales calls you've done, the prospecting calls, the cold calls, anything you've done where you've gotten a concern from a client or a prospect, and jot those down. So first step is to just write down as many as you can. Once you've got down as many as you can, then identify what the top 3 or 5 are. The ones like, these 3 happen the majority of the time, like 90% of the time it's one of these 3, or 90% of the time it's one of these 5. And what we want to do is use those as examples as we go through this process. And you can be thinking about those, and even better is to think about specific clients that gave you these concerns And you can kind of play through in your head, and as we go through the participant guide on how you'll use the process and use and come up with relevant questions and use the techniques appropriately. So take a few moments, pause the video here. Step one, write down as many of the concerns or objections that you can think of. And then after that, isolate the top 3 to 5 that probably contribute to about 90% of when you get an objection. Chances are in your top 3 or top 5 is, oh, well, you're too much money, or I don't have the money to invest right now, or some form of investment type of, they don't want to spend the money. The second one is what I would call the status quo. Well, we've worked with SkinCeuticals for a long time. We have a really good rep there. Something like that. They're just comfortable with the status quo. Even if it isn't great, it's something they know. It's what they know. So those are two of probably one of the most common you come up against. But I'm sure there are other ones and other ones that are finer tuned ones as well. But identify those top 3 to 5 and be thinking about those as we go through the process here. Okay, we've got the objection. First step as the salesperson we jump into is clarify and listen. Review this page, and I'm sure a lot of this will resonate. And when you slow down and think about it, you're probably saying to yourself, well, either number 1, oh, I do that, or number 2, I used to do that, or number 3, I really need to do that. And what I found is it's not that it's hard, that it's very easy to understand. It's really difficult to do it in the moment when you're actually meeting with a client. But when you look at the benefits for you and the client to clarify and listening, it's a no-brainer. You should be doing it. So number 1 here, they often dissipate the emotion behind the concern as they talk about it and become more open to our response. I think of this as softening the soil. The more they talk about it, think of resistance or receptivity, resistance, I should say, being right up here when people initially have a reaction like, oh, I don't want to move forward, I don't want to spend the money. It's high. The more you get them to talk about it, it begins to come down. It's like air coming out of a balloon. And so if you respond at this top level, chances are it's going to be met with more emotion and more and less receptivity. Now, if we can bring that down and get them talking, okay, if we respond down here, it's less of a fight and it becomes you two working together. So there's a few other ones here. I'm sure some will resonate, but take a look at this list. What one jumps out at you? Based on this information in this page here, what are you excited about and what do you want to do more of when you sit down with a client and they give you an objection or a concern? What one will you put into practice? At the very bottom here are a couple of techniques or ways you can continue to clarify and, again, keep the client talking. Now, I'm not talking about just getting them to talk. It's about getting them to slow down and think. They are much more likely to listen to themselves. And the more they explain, the more they share with you their situation, chances are you've heard it before, but it's their story. The chances of you meeting them, their receptivity going up and resistance coming down, is by asking some of these nondescript questions. Oh, so tell me more about that. $4,000, I didn't think an opening order would be that high. That's just wasn't what it's just too much. Well, tell me a little more about that. Now the ball's in their court. Well, blah, blah, blah is going on. They're going to give you some good clues. And sometimes when they speak it out loud, they realize, oh, that's kind of maybe not a big deal after all, or, hey, what makes you say that? Maybe they had a poor experience before. It's good for us to understand that, and we may be able to overcome that, or they may be reminded of something we do that could help them overcome that. Tell me more about that. Help me understand. Hey, could you expand on that? And remember, it's not just these questions, but it's how we ask the questions and when. So remember, it's about collaboration. It's not about putting them on the spot. Because if you look at some of these questions, they could be asked in a confrontational way, right? Hey, what makes you say that? Of course, we don't want to do that. This is about collaboration and slowing down the process. So when you ask the question, it's not to respond, it's to listen. In fact, during this part of the resolving concerns process, often you should have some dead air where there's a little, they've responded and it sounds like they're done. You're just going to give an extra moment or two where they can add even more, because often that's where the gold is. And you just slow down and more thinking is happening. So does that make sense? And once we've clarified and listened, then we've earned the right to go to the next step. Now, that next step is restate. And notice this is not parrot, okay? Parroting is where we respond back exactly with what they said in their words back to them. It's where we communicate back to them what we understood them saying to us. So we rephrase it a little bit, and it's, we can start it out with some of these segues or these phrases to get us started. So it really helps you communicate back to the prospect your understanding of the situation the way they explained it to you. And what this will do is two things. Number one, logically, it's going to make sure you're on the same page, that you have the right information. Emotionally, it's going to demonstrate to them you were listening, and that's super powerful. And when they feel that, trust goes through the roof. And when trust is high, that's when sales go high. So it sounds very subtle here, but if we're able to communicate back succinctly what they shared with us accurately, trust goes through the roof. In fact, even if we get it 75, 80% right, it's going to go really high. And that 25% where we might need more clarification, they're going to talk more. They're going to give you more clues and even better clues on what's really holding them up. So don't be afraid that you might not have it 100% perfect. Chances are they haven't formulated what their response is or why they truly are concerned. It was just that reaction. So this is a big one here. Slow down, restate, use some of the terms here like, hey, from what I understand, or, so your concern is, or so it sounds like what you're saying is, so those little things can really help you nail this step. Who doesn't like a good cushion, right? Do you like sitting on those hard benches at a hockey game or a football game that are cold? No, we want a cushion, right? And this is where we just soften the blow a little bit. And these are just some phrases that help us just, again, continue to keep the process at a slower pace so more thinking is happening and less reacting. Now, cushions, it's key here that they are neutral statements. They shouldn't agree or disagree with the client. So, we can't move forward. $4,000, that's just too much for us right now. I agree. I've been telling our leadership we have to have a much lower opening orders for accounts, especially for you guys. That's not going to get us anywhere. Now I know you wouldn't say that. Otherwise, you'd probably work at Skin Medica. I probably shouldn't say that. That's not nice. Anyway, but we're not going to agree with them. We don't want to disagree either. 4,000? What do you mean? Actually, a better order should be 10,000. What are you worried about? Right? That's disagreeing. Of course, I'm being a little ridiculous, right? The thing is, what we want to do is put ourselves on their side of the table. So less me versus them. It's about me and them, about helping them be successful, helping their business be successful. So cushioning statements really help create that type of conversation and that type of collaboration. I understand. That's a valid concern. You're acknowledging it and saying, hey, I understand you'll have that. I totally get it. Hey, I hear what you're saying. That's an important consideration. You're smart to be thinking about that. A little compliment in there. Others have said that same thing. So these are just neutral statements. And when we can say them and slow things down, it's not about rushing through. It's about helping them to slow down, think. And I like to think of it this way, where they almost trip over the answer. And that, oh, I get it now. No, this does make sense. In fact, maybe we should open with 7,000 and do this and do that, right? Sometimes that happens, believe it or not. So once we've used the cushion, we can then go on to the next step of the process, which is we want to draw out and isolate additional concerns. We don't want to assume that's their only one. We want to make sure there aren't any other ones that could get in the way of us moving forward. I call this the smoke screen. People are nice people, and they'll often lie to you. And when I say lie, I mean that half jokingly, but they're going to share with you what sounds good, what's going to be least likely to hurt your feelings. Do you think they get a lot of joy out of saying, no, I'm not going to buy from you? Most people have a hard time. Now, we know some people in New York don't. Just kidding. I'm from Boston. Just, you can take it, right? But when we do this, is people often give us the ones that sound good, not the real one. And so when we want to draw out and isolate that concern, that helps us identify truly what's keeping us from moving forward. I'd like you to just pause the video for a moment and think about this. Think about some clients or prospects you've had where you might say to yourself, like, wow, yeah, that happened to me. And answer these questions. And you've gotten a smoke screen before when they gave you the objection or the concern, you answered it and solved it. And then all of a sudden, no, I'm still not ready to move forward. That one there, they had another objection that we didn't draw out. And it might be helpful to look back at, 1, 2, or 3 prospects maybe you have in the pipe right now where, gosh, I thought we were going to move forward. I've answered all their questions. You may have answered a lot of questions, but you haven't answered the question. So take a moment, think about, draw out and isolate. And once I come back to this, I'll give you a technique that can help you really yank that hidden objection out of them. So when I first was taught this, I'm like, well, yeah, I get it. They may be hiding an objection, but how do I get that out of them? Well, it's not one thing. It's building trust throughout the conversation from the very beginning on will have a huge impact on this. But the phrase that I found works well is, in addition to price or the opening order size, what are some other concerns you'd have about moving forward? So in addition to, notice I'm not solving it yet. I'm assuming they have another one. So it sounds like $4,000 is a bit much for you to get started on. What, if any, other concerns do you have about moving forward? And they might share it at that point. So now you got a couple out there. So it sounds like it's the price plus you're a little short on staffing, and COVID's kind of an issue right now because your volume is lower than usual. Is that right? Okay. So you got those two. Are there any other concerns that might keep you, if we're able to magically solve those, are there any other concerns that would keep you from moving forward? Oh, no, just those two? Now, sometimes they even have 3, but you want to get them all out. Don't stop at 2. Confirm with them how many they have and get them all out. Then at that point, we got to go on to isolate the concern. We'll jump on into that right now. Okay, isolating the concern. So notice down here, we drew out the hidden concerns. In addition to, what other concerns do you have? In addition to this and this, what other concerns would keep you from moving forward? Get them all out. Now, this is where we want to isolate the primary concern. And we simply do this. So Bob, it sounds like you have three different concerns: X, Y, and Z. Out of those three, what one should we talk about first? And generally, the one they choose is the key one. So you can do it as simply as that, or hey, out of these three concerns you have, if you had to rank them, the one that's probably weighing on your mind most, what one would it be? So it's a simple question like that. At that point, you got to let them respond, because then they'll truly give you the main one that's keeping them from moving forward. Does that make sense? Now, at that point, you isolate it and say, okay, well, let's talk about that one first. You may even jump back into clarifying to get them to share even more. They might have additional information that they could talk about. And often, if you get them talking more, they may even overcome it. Or together or yourself, you might have a perfect response or a way to take care of that situation. But now you know you got the primary one. So then you're at the response stage. And then lastly, we'll jump next into the trial close before we jump into the responses, because this is a technique that kind of happens during that whole conversation. So let me talk a little bit about the trial close. So if you've been in sales, you have, of course, heard about trial closes. So take a look at this page. And I like to define it just to make sure we're all talking the same language. When you think about a trial close, it's a question that gets a person's opinion. It's not a yes, no. Hey, are you ready to buy? Are you ready to buy now? That's a hard close question. And chances are you can only ask that once or twice before you become kind of irritating and pushy. So you only want to ask a hard close. Would you like to move forward now? You want to ask that once. So how do you figure that out? We figure it out with trial closes. It's a way to kind of test to see where our prospect is in terms of going to the next step. I like the analogy of a traffic signal. And if you think about it, if you were teaching your children how to drive, what do they do at each color light, right? First and foremost, red. If we see a red light, what do? Even my 12-year-old daughter knows you stop. It's pretty clear cut. You get a red light, you stop. In sales, you get red lights. Sometimes people are it's not the right time. You're not connecting. Maybe you start to see that it's not a good fit for us. There's some deal breakers in this account that demonstrate it's just not going to be a good fit. And it's probably time to just stop and kind of cut bait. Or stop for right now. It's just not good timing. Now then there's the green light. Pretty clear. You go. In terms of if you're driving and you come to an intersection, it's a green light. If you stop, you're going to cause an accident. There's going to be issues, right? Because people will be watching that green light. They can rear end you. It's the same thing in sales. Have you ever noticed a salesperson who gets a green light and they stop? I think I've done that a few times where, man, it seems to be going so, well, but I keep talking. And pretty soon I just keep talking and I add in so much information, I've caused paralysis. And now they went from, I want to move forward to, you know what, let me think about it. We've gotten to that green light intersection and we waited so long, or we were so slow, we got the yellow and now it's red. We lost our opportunity. I know, but see a green light, take it, move forward. The next is the yellow light. And if you think about that light, this is the one that requires judgment. I'm not exactly sure what the law says, but when you see a yellow light, you proceed with caution, right? Basically, it's if you can get through the intersection safely, not going 90 miles an hour or, being, dangerous, then you go through the light. And if you can't and you can stop safely, then you want to stop. It's the same thing in sales. This is where there's that judgment. And with some prospects, you see a yellow light and it's like they're just not quite at the point where you can take them to the next step and close that sale. And that sale, what I mean is, sometimes it's opening up with a new opening order. Sometimes it's just asking for that next appointment. So at that point, you're like, I can't make it through the intersection safely. And then there's the time when you get a yellow light, and the prudent thing is to go forward and get through that intersection. In sales, this is when, the prospect seems to be moving along, but you just need to kind of pull them along with you and just give them your confidence and, close with confidence with a good plan. And you're going to get them through the intersection, and you'll both get through the intersection safely, and you're moving on. So when you think about trial closes, think about what color light am I getting and what should I do next? Here are some example trial closes. Hey, how does that sound so far? Does this make sense? Or what do you think about this? I also like the 1 through 10. Hey, on a scale of 1 through 10, how motivated at this point are you, thinking about and moving forward to maybe bringing ZO in? 10 would be, I'm ready to go right now. I want your biggest opening order ever. Or 1, you know what? There's just no way this is going to happen. I like you, but it's just not going to happen. Where are you at in that spectrum? Now, if they give you the 5, you say, here's a little trick on this scale, little kind of digression here. If they give you a 5, what you say is, oh, a 5, huh? You know what? That's higher than I thought. I thought you were going to be about a 3. And when you do that, typically what they do is they start to tell you why they're a 5 instead of a 3, which means they're selling in the positive. Well, I'm a 5 because of this, and they're telling you the things they like. Versus if they say, I'm probably about a 5. Oh, man, I thought you were a 7. Now, in that case, they have to justify why they're lower. Well, I'll tell you what I don't like, right? So just be aware if you do that 1 through 10 or 1 through 5 where you're at. Be thoughtful about how you ask the follow-up and how you can maybe build the sale from there. All right. So anyway, if you like that, use it. If not, don't worry, right? But use trial closes to help kind of test to see where you are in the sales process and the prospect's receptivity, and if we're like moving forward and we can continue to move forward, or do we need to slow this puppy down? Okay, so we've reviewed the process pillar to post. The client gives you an objection or a concern. They're slowing this thing down. They're not quite ready to move forward. They don't have their checkbook out. They aren't giving you their credit card. We first clarify and listen. After that, we restate and cushion the objection. After we restate and cushion, we draw out additional concerns. We confirm that we get them all out, any and all concerns they may have in moving forward with the relationship or the next step, whatever our desired outcome is. Once we have them all out, we isolate the primary one. Out of all these 3 that you mentioned, what one should we talk about first? Once we've isolated it, we might clarify a bit more, keep them talking, and then at that point, we confirm that that's the main one, and we've earned the right to go to this step, which is respond. So I'd like you to think about this one. It's a worksheet here, and I have a couple of worksheets for you. So yours might be a little different than this, but hey, I can't commit to this $4,000. This is just a little bit steeper than what I thought it might be. I just can't commit. So think about if you had a prospect and they said something like this, and let me be clear, a specific prospect. All right. So think back to that one. What clarifying questions could you ask? Or what clarifying questions did you ask? Did they work well? How did they work for you? So just slow the whole thing down and go through this exercise with me. What ones would you ask? Just jot down a couple right there. And when you're asking these, be careful you don't ask closed-ended questions. Closed-ended, again, stop the conversation. You want open-ended. What? Why? How? Tell me more about. Could you expand on that? Anything like that. And what I was taught as well is short questions tend to include less information, which is when you maybe try to lead the witness. Let me give you an example what I mean by that. If, for example, I say to my daughter, oh, do you not want to go to that movie because it's scary, Abigail? Right? I just planted in her head the reason why she doesn't want to go to the movie. So rather than do that, just say, hey, Abby, tell me, why is it you don't want to go to that movie? So nondescript, let them fill in the blanks. There are times when you need to give information. There are times when you don't want to poison the well, if you will. So what are some questions you could ask? Now, after you've thought about that, we don't know what they responded with, but in this case, maybe you do know. What would you say to restate that concern? Now, this one's a little bit harder to craft because it's obviously relevant based on their answer. What's one or two cushions based on the list we reviewed earlier that you're like, oh, I like this one. I use this one a lot. What one would you use? And a lot of them are really pretty universal. You just want to make sure it's authentic and you're having a conversation. You're not here to be a robot. You're here to slow down and help walk through where they're at. You're collaborating. Then after that, what would you say in response to this concern? So chances are you've answered this one thousands of times, right? So I'm sure you're equipped with probably 4, 6, 8 different ways to answer this question. But based on the prospect that you're thinking about, what one did you use that worked? Or if you're thinking about a prospect, what are 1 or 2 that you think may work based on the information you know about them right now? And then finally, write down 1 if it didn't work. So you responded, but it didn't seem to get us moving further. And that indicates, number 1, we didn't have enough information because it didn't solve their issue or make them feel better about their concern. Or number 2, we answered the concern that wasn't the primary concern. We probably didn't smoke out or draw out the real objection. And then finally, after we respond, again, not a hard yes, no, it's a trial close. So, what are your thoughts on that? Or how do you see that potentially working in your practice? So again, soft opinion asking questions. This works best if you just take an objection and go through this worksheet. My advice is get the old cell phone out and write down an objection on this next sheet. Let's go there right now. Go to the next worksheet. You choose the concern, you choose the client, and take 3 minutes and say, hey, Siri, set timer for 3 minutes. And Siri's going to do her job. And look at that. She's setting one for 3 minutes. And I want you to dedicate just 3 minutes to this exercise. I bet a better version of you shows up. And more than that, I bet you get more sales. So why don't you go through this exercise once or twice and use the worksheets that we have in the playbook here. So now that you worked on one that was specific to one of your clients, I want to give you the assignment to think about a couple that you potentially have encountered earlier or you could potentially encounter. And we've heard this from the field. So we're looking for you to think about this and share your ideas with your coach and let them know what you came up with. What I heard a long time ago was 2 brains are better than 1 or 2 heads are better than 1, right? We're all better as a team if we're sharing ideas. And the best way to get even more robust, stronger ideas is when sometimes we work independently. So that way we can add to the conversation, not just say, oh, I do that too. Just do it independently. So for example, hey, you know what? I would rather meet in person. I don't like this Zoom stuff, right? There are some clients out there that maybe they want to meet, but it's not safe in that area or what have you, right? But there are a lot of AEs who have had a lot of success, and some of them were skeptics in the beginning, like, there's no way I can do this job doing Zoom, right? We're not saying in person is totally eliminated. Sometimes our clients are comfortable with what they had. It may not be the best way. So how would you answer this one? And you know what? Together, collaborating, you might decide, yes, we should get together. Or together, you might find out, you know what, we can do this virtually and save everyone some time, but also maybe even have a better meeting. So go through this exercise on this one. And again, get old Siri out, right? Spend 3 minutes, 3.5 minutes. What do you say? And a better version of you will show up. And then the next one I'd like to ask you to work on is, hey, we work with Allegarin and Skin Medica, and we don't want to lose out on our Brilliant Distinction program. So some people put up that as an objection. It may be real, but I bet you have some ways to overcome that. But remember, it's how do you get them talking about that? How do you help them trip over the ideas, the options on, is this really worth it, right? Sometimes we're invested in programs that don't make a lot of sense. This Siri, look at that, 3 minutes, right? Stop that, okay? So that's your exercise, and work on this. And then lastly, putting this into play, okay? Putting it into play is, I want you to think about an upcoming appointment you have, one that you can be super deliberate about using this process. Maybe you've been prospecting this account and had 1 or 2 conversations with them, but it's just not going in the direction you'd like, or it's not going as fast as you'd like. Put this into practice and let us know how it goes. Last few pages here, folks, is some best practices. You can review that, check off the ones that really resonate with you. And again, more importantly, put them into practice. So we went through all this stuff. What was most critical to you? What caught your attention? Write down 1 or 2 topics that are going to help you be on your A game when you get out there, or A plus, I should say, because after all, you guys are ZO, right? All right, that's it for addressing concerns. We'll see you in the next module.